That's that pickup truck right there. I think we launched it like 100 feet in the air, and it went about 200 feet down the road, and it weighed about 8,000 pounds.
So what makes an explosion a good explosion?
Color, texture, detail, particles, not just a fireball, but stuff that moves through the air.
Why are we drawn to this?
For film, I think it's because it's a sense of danger, risk. It's energy, it's impact, excitement. It's big, it's dynamic on the screen. It's like whoa, it's like the audience will be literally blown away sometimes by the explosion. So it ramps things up, including the performances of the actors. When they're in the shot, the real explosion has that sort of dynamic punch that gets everybody moving that you can't do when the director says bang. There has to be a bang.
What exactly, what goes in to creating an explosion for a movie or a TV show?
Obviously, it starts with the script. What's in the story? What does the director want to see? So we look at that from a creative perspective and figure out what it needs to look like. And then there's the sort of design and engineering aspects of figuring out what it takes to create that. And then there's the regulatory side of it where we have to go and approach the city and say, hey, we want to do this thing here. It's going to seem a little crazy to you, but we're going to make it work. And then we have to convince them with our engineering and our track record and our licenses and our insurance and our lawyers. And then we get the green light, and then we put it all together and we blow something up.
So how much explosive stuff will you usually be using in one of these?
It can be anywhere from a pound or two of black powder, low explosive, all the way up to tens or hundreds of pounds of high explosive. It depends on where the event has to take place more than anything.
So how do you figure out exactly how much you're going to need?
The joke in the industry is composition P, plenty. Right? That's you can see where that's going, but no, it's very carefully planned out. We have obviously years of experience. We kind of know what the size of the charge, and we work backwards from what the goal is. How big of the fireball has to be? How far does debris have to fly? And then through our experience and some engineering, we can figure out how much of a charge to use. And that's really more engineering more experience than anything, because there are so many variables, and you can't just trust it to paper. You have to know that it's going to work. And we'll do testing, a lot of testing sometimes if it's critical, either due to safety and, proximity to cast and crew, or if there's some sensitive environmental issues. There's a lot of reasons we would test and develop something very specific that is within those confines.
Is it a math equation at the end of the day where, okay, we have this much explosive, we're going to go through this material that is this thick, we need it to go this far? How much of it is science? How much of it is art?
So the way you just asked that, if you were actually breaking real things, it would be engineering. There's very specific calculations to figure out exactly how much explosive of what type you're using is going to create that type of damage. Most of the time, we're blowing up something that has been designed to come apart. So we're just pushing things through the air. We're not actually shattering concrete. All that concrete is fake. It's all this lightweight plaster or foam coated with rubber and plaster to look like rock, cement. And then we're pushing it with a very low energy explosion that just kind of throws it far enough to be believable. As opposed to putting dynamite in a cement wall. That's not very common. In our world, we're distributing the energy generally by directing it in what we call a mortar, like a steel metal pot. The charge goes in, the debris goes on top of it. When the charge goes off, it throws the debris through the air, and we can position that to push a door off a car, to blow a door off a building, to blow a wall apart. And we will add all the extra debris in front of that charge to create that look. So that could be one concentrated charge in the middle, creating the illusion of blowing that whole thing apart. Whereas if we were doing it for real, we might, distribute that amount of explosive over multiple smaller charges. So they're more point effective.
Does it usually go the way you think that it was going to go?
Yes, always. Very rarely are we surprised.
Not even like a little bit? Like, oh no, that thing did exactly what we thought it was going to do.
Yeah. And because of the risk, the safety, and all that, it may even be a little bit less than we'd wanted. Going bigger than what you want is a problem because risk for stunt people. They get burned if they're too close to a fireball that was too big. Can't do that. So we have to know. And so our precision is what our reputation is based on.
How many do you remember how many you've done?
Hundreds, thousands. From the tiniest little things like someone's eyeglasses getting shattered to whole buildings exploding.
To get some perspective on it, right? Because you've done so many different jobs, let's just look at, say, like the average one. The average one is going to take you this long from start to finish. It's going to cost this much, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a couple $100 to a couple thousand for your average explosion, and it can be in the tens or hundreds of thousands if you're breaking and destroying a lot of material. And it's really not about the explosives. It's about the prep time, the fabrication time to build all this stuff. Testing, we do a lot of testing, so that eats up a lot of time and a lot of man hours and a lot of material and a lot of cars. Sometimes at the end of a movie, we have a parking lot filled with blown up cars. And it's not because we're trying to figure out how to blow up the car. It's because we're trying to create a very nuanced look that the director is asking for. So we do a lot of testing and put it on video and get approval from the boss man. And so I think that's probably where the biggest costs come from.
What is the director like? What are they generally kind of looking for? What stuff will they say to you?
Okay, so here's the thing. You'll hear this a lot, and it's a common joke in our industry. I don't know what I want, but when I see it, I know what I don't want. Right? Like, not so much. I didn't like that. Try something else. It's for anyone, asking for something creative. There's a little bit of you have to have a gift of explaining it, and the people you're explaining it to have to be able to interpret what you're saying. And there's a lot that can get lost in that process. The one that I remember most is the guy said that we were blowing up like an ammo storage facility in the jungle. And he said, I don't care what it is, it just needs to be big and it shouldn't look like an oil refinery exploding.
I don't even know what that means.
I think he didn't want just a giant fireball. He wanted debris flying and sparks and multiple steps to the explosion,
So this is the explosion of the Death Star.
I remember seeing this in the theater. It was one of the first theatrical releases I saw. It looks a little corny now, but it was so awesome at the time.
So how did they do that then?
So a lot of those shots, because they take place in space, you don't want the sparks like in a 4th of July fireworks shell. They all start to fall towards the ground. You want them to just go out and just continue going out. So the way they simulated that was filming either from the bottom and hanging the charge above them and blowing the charge up. So everything just goes towards the camera or away. Or they invert that and shoot straight down on it and everything blows up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get you.
You just shoot at a different angle so gravity is working in your favor visually.
Is there, like in almost any explosion that we're seeing, or in a lot of them or whatever, are we usually seeing kind of a trick? In the sense that, like, you're not really looking at something in the way that you think that you're looking at it.
Very much so in these kind of outer space movies where there's, or underwater, where you have buoyancy and gravity and all these other forces. There's going to be a lot of trickery in the camera positioning and how the shots are arranged, lined up so that they can take advantage of that or minimize the negative aspects of those environments. But for the typical explosion out on a street, not so much.
This is one that when I think of a movie explosion, I'm going to date myself. This is the one that always jumps out big to me. This is Independence Day, the first one.
That was a large-scale miniature So these guys are experts at miniature pyrotechnics to look like they're large. So they can use different materials that behave in a way that scales properly with the scale model.
And they're just shooting that like real micro lens style then.
Yeah, the special lenses, frame rates that are different than what you would normally use. A lot of times it's very high frame rates, and then they can slow it down. And they use pyrotechnic materials that burn a little slower and have more granular texture to the fire. So when they stretch it out on the big screen, it doesn't look like a tiny little teaspoon of gasoline exploding. It's got this thick, rich, dark black, smoky.
What's usually the hardest part of the explosion to get right?
In these kind of shots or just in general?
Both. Let's do these kind of like miniature shots and then in general.
These ones, it's scaling the velocity of the debris to make it look believable and realistic for what it is. Because it's a miniature, everything is different, including the physics. Well, the physics is actually you can't adjust the physics, so you have to work with what you have. And so they use camera speed, and different techniques to blow things apart. It may not be high explosives. It could be compressed air with fireballs made with fuel and particulate. It could be small black powder charges that are low energy. Sometimes there is high explosives laced in those buildings to break things apart, but that's not really the visual thing. That's just the mechanical destruction. And then there's a lot of techniques applied on top of that to sort of conceal that and bring everything into that slow, big, heavy, dramatic look. To the eye, it would look very different. If you stand there and watch them blow one of those up, it's like, bang, what happened? And in the movie, it's huge and it takes seconds.
Yeah, because obviously if you're blowing up a real car, it's going to move a lot differently than if you're blowing up a tiny miniature little plastic car. What about like in a large scale explosion, one that's not miniaturized? What's like the most difficult part of that usually?
I mean, for me, the difficult part is always creating the look the director's asking for, and then keeping it safe for the environment and for the people. So that's, it's easy to make something huge, but that isn't always appropriate. We do stuff in the middle of downtown Los Angeles with, chrome and glass buildings all around, and we're making these huge explosions. We can't be breaking all the windows. It'd be easy to just make a huge explosion, but then there'd be a cost to pay. Loss of a license, going to jail, people getting injured. You just can't do that. So making it look big or even making it big but safe in those environments, that's where the challenge comes in. That's the hardest part.
So is this the enemy of the state one?
The building existed, concrete building, and they were going to tear it down anyway. So they got the location department, found that building. It worked out for the scene. The director told the demolition crew that they wanted the building to come down in a certain way and not just flat to the ground in a million pieces, but leave some residual of the building kind of toppled onto the pile. So it was kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae. And he wanted the fireball to clear before the building fell so that the fireball didn't obscure the structural demolition portion of that explosion. So timing all of that, which involves some testing, calculating how long it took the fireball to clear before the building started moving, that was an elaborate timing plan that took a little bit of testing. And then, from experience and understanding of how things work, we were able to achieve that with a team of excellent people.
Yeah, I can see what you're talking about. The fireball goes, you see the building, then the building starts to collapse.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the elevator tower structure kind of ends up landing on top of the debris pile.
So obviously, like, what's that pressure like in the sense that you're not getting another shot at that?
No. Yeah, Yeah, so the pressure is there for sure. That's definitely a thing you cannot escape. But, with enough planning and enough preparation and enough understanding of what you're doing, there's a high confidence of success when we do these. It's not a winging it situation.
Everything that we're kind of seeing here, will all of this actually be happening at the same time? Or is it, nope, it's just the explosion and the cars driving? But like the actors aren't in those cars, right?
No, there'll be stunt people in the cars. And they were actually driving out of the building, and the stunt guys hiding behind the car across the street. The train was real. The helicopters were real. There was nothing that wasn't real in there, but, Will Smith and Gene Hackman weren't in there.
Have you ever had somebody not be rolling?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes it's, one of many cameras, so it's not the end of the world. Sometimes the camera jams. Sometimes the battery dies right at the moment. There have been a couple of those.
That's happened more than once? I would think.
It happens enough that it's, they always ask, are those batteries fresh? Is there any reason we're not going to get this? Like, are you sure everyone's going to be rolling and up to speed before they pull the trigger? And with digital, it's less important because the camera can run the whole time. And I think on the Enemy of the State building, there was a fire truck it's a long story. I don't know if you want to hear the whole thing, but.
Oh no, I'm hooked. I'm already in.
So you saw there was a train that had to drive by the building, and there was cars that had to leave. Stunt guys had to run out. Helicopters had to fly in, and all this had to be timed with the building explosion. Primarily so that everybody was in a safe spot, but so all the action in front of the cameras was happening at the right time. So we had the whole city closed off, and the blasting machine is being charged up. The detonators are all in place. Everybody's standing by. There's a countdown of actions for all the different pieces. The train has to start early because it takes a long time to get up to speed. And all these things are happening in this big, long, elaborate timeline, queuing all this stuff to start, including cameras. And then there was a fire or some emergency call on the other side of this big, giant lockup. And the fire trucks had priority, and they drove right through the lockup, and they crossed in front of the path of the train, so the engineer had to stop the train. And when that happened, it put the whole sequence out of whack, but there was no stopping and resetting because our 10-minute window of closing the interstate was about to expire. So they had to go for it. And the helicopters had gone and done their pass and had cleared out, and the building hadn't exploded. And many of the cameras rolled out of film before the explosion happened. So they got it on like 3 or 4 out of 14 cameras.
Oh. God, that is just the universe.
Oh, it was horrible. But, they made the best of it. The editing, it came together really well, but there were some shots I would have loved to have seen, like the helicopter shot looking straight down. We never got to see that.
All because of a fire, all because of one
yeah,
domino.
They had priority. The security guards let him through, I guess. I don't know the details exactly, but it stopped everything. And that train took forever to get rolling again. And they couldn't push the button until the engine was past the building. So the guy, if something flew out of the building, it wouldn't hurt the operator of the train. Yeah, that was a big deal.
And that's one of those things that you have to do what you can. You can't stop, reset, go back, get a permit to close the whole highway again.
Yeah, it would never happen. All the dynamite was in the building, all the black powder charges and fuel was in there. It was all ready to go. There was no coming back tomorrow.
Is there a discussion that's happening in those moments, or is it just
It was pre-planned. If anything goes wrong, it's going to go anyway. So we have enough cameras. If we lose it on 1 or 2, we'll still be good. And they lost it on several. But they made the best of it. It cut together well.
But does part of you wonder, God, what would that have looked like?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about people walking away from explosions like this?
It's a genre. It's a cliche, and it's almost expected. It would almost be a mistake not to do that, I think, in those kind of movies.
Does it drive you nuts at all?
Yeah, who in their right mind would stand out in the open with the building blowing up behind them? I mean, obviously there would be high explosives in a building, and the fragments are traveling 10 times the speed of a rifle bullet. You're not going to duck. It's just going to be over. You're going to be dead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, if this really happened, this is, I think, one of the Wolverine movies. I cannot remember exactly which one this is. Like, if all of that is really occurring, that explosion is there, he's there, what in this case, like, really happens?
So, like, you can see that debris flying in the movies. On the set, that debris is lightweight, cork, balsa wood. It's not going to go very far, and it's not going to have much energy. But if it's a real building, it's concrete and steel. So as it's flying past him, if it hit him, it would go right through him and kill him. It's not fluff. It's hard objects getting shattered with, tremendous energy. And the radiant heat from the fireball would probably make him start to run and react. You're just not going to not react. I don't know.
Yeah, you're not. But this one looks more like that might actually have been there.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not that close. And, like I said, we can direct the debris very specifically and put the actor very close and have debris blow past him on both sides. And it looks like he's in the danger zone, but he's actually in the clear zone.
Do you like Apocalypse Now or Spectre?
Spectre, I think, had more like technically sophisticated effects.
It was the bigger one, right?
I think this is one they claimed as the world record. But the one we did on Terminator was bigger than this in terms of the amount of fuel and the amount of explosives. So I don't know where they get their numbers, but
does this look familiar?
This is the scene of the harvester attack. Launching that pickup truck was pretty. I think we burned 8,000 gallons of diesel fuel that afternoon. I think we launched it like 100 feet in the air, and it went about 200 feet down the road, and it weighed about 8,000 pounds. So there's that's a real car going 100 feet in the air.
That's crazy.
And then through the roof, that's all real.
Are you surprised when you see it on screen? Like, oh man, that's how they did that.
Not usually. Like this movie, I was pleasantly surprised at how everything cohesively tied together in terms of the look, the air, the dust, the smoke, the vehicles, the lighting, everything. It didn't look like a bunch of random pieces edited together. It looked like it was part of a big cohesive scene.
When you try to get these permits, do people ever be like, you're going to do what?
Yeah. Yeah. And then they ask how we're going to mitigate the risk, and are we going to damage their street? Or like in this instance, there was a big natural gas pipeline buried underground right near where all this was happening. So we had to put seismographs out to measure the ground vibration to ensure the gas company and the permitting authority that we were not exceeding the vibration levels that would be considered dangerous to the pipeline. So we had to do the engineering and make sure that we weren't detonating enough explosives to create that kind of problem. And then we had to document that we monitored and our vibration levels were below the limit.
Is it usually harder to get the permit or harder to get insurance?
The production companies get the insurance through whatever means they do. And it usually, as long as there's qualified people working on the job, they don't have a problem getting the insurance. They might have to pay extra for certain high risk things. If there's humans, they try to take the risk out of it, but obviously there's some risk when there's big trucks driving around and debris flying through the air. But it's all carefully organized and coordinated so that nobody's really in danger. So I think the insurance is probably the easier part. The bigger part is getting the city to sign off on the plan.
I could see that.
Here we're out in the desert. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's not much to hurt there. But we do these scenes sometimes right in the middle of downtown Los Angeles, like the scene from Live Free or Die Hard with the helicopter and the police car crashes into the helicopter in the air and blows up. That was right in the middle of all the high-dollar banking buildings with expensive glass windows, and they had to close off, blocks and blocks of the city for that. And
are you ready for some harder/listener submitted questions?
Sure.
Smallest explosion that you've ever done?
It's probably the glasses. I forget the reason, but the glass need to shatter in the glasses. So that was a tiny explosive charge very close to someone's eye, breaking a piece of special plastic that's designed to shatter.
Biggest one you've ever done?
As far as the biggest scene was probably the Enemy of the State building implosion. But as far as like the biggest fireball would have been on Terminator Salvation. And I believe we had like 2,400 gallons of gasoline and a couple 100 pounds of explosive. And that made a giant fireball that looked like an atom bomb, and it lasted a long time, and it was pretty cool.
How intricate can you get with the explosion, right? Because I think of it as just like, all right, there's the big fireball, but like, how do you can then create the sparks, you can have the fireball go a certain way, like how intricate can you get with it?
All of that, and the debris, what is the debris made out of? What does it look like when it flies through the air? Is there dust and smoke? Is it a certain color? Does it have to match the environment? Like a bomb landing in dirt. If the dirt's red, maybe you want the debris blown up to be red, but you want some black in there to signify black smoke. So we put other material in there to kind of paint and color that dust explosion, the debris flying through the air. And there's a fireball intertwined with that, maybe multiple fireballs, particulate matter like granular stuff or chunks of lightweight material flying through the air, dragging dust with it. There's a lot of pieces to it that can all be finely tuned. And when everything's balanced, right, it all looks seamless. It looks really cool.
How many people would you say oh, you're just going to blow it up? Like just put some C4 down there and light it.
Yeah, that's usually pretty boring and really dangerous because the explosion's really fast. The film can't really capture a high explosive event. So we stretch things out using low explosives that have a lower energy level, less velocity. They don't push things as fast, so the eye has a chance to recognize what you're looking at.
Yeah, like, hey, do they shoot it in a certain frame rate then to try to capture it? Like, how do they usually shoot it to make sure they get it?
Yeah, they'll often shoot it at a higher frame rate so they have more that they can slow it down in post.
How do people in the industry feel about CGI?
Well, the people who do it love it. And CGI has its place. I mean, there's CGI, there's visual effects, and there's AI technology applied to all of that. The computer generated images, everybody would love to have everything real. The people who build and design the sets want the whole set to be real. There just isn't time or money sometimes. So now often they'll build the first floor of a building and all the rest is CGI.
Really?
Yeah. So they can do things like we had to blow up a piece of the White House on a movie. Well, they're not going to give us permission to do that at the White House. It's just too involved. The permit would be too complicated. It's just not going to happen. So they built a recreation of it, but they didn't build the whole thing. They extended it with visual effects. They built the area where the actors were going to be performing in front of, so they have physical objects to light and film, and for the cast to interact with.
Has it hurt the industry, or has it?
It's maybe reduced some of the construction labor cost. They have to build less sets. But it's opened up opportunities to do things that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. And that includes like putting actors in a very dangerous position. We can use computer compositing tools. We don't. The visual effects department uses compositing tools to stick an actor in a place that they weren't, that's blowing up, and make it look dangerous. And so it's helped us. It gives us gives the director more, gives him more flexibility on how to achieve, their vision, because they can lean on all these different technologies, and, between them and the department heads, they can pick the best combination of technique to get the final look. So I don't think it's hurt the industry. In general, there's a few things that we can point to that they don't do anymore because it's easier to do it in post. VFX, like bullet hits on wardrobe. Used to be every movie you had dozens of costumes that you had to rig with the blood effects. Now they maybe do one take of that and the rest is all CG composited. They don't want to spend the time on the set changing wardrobe and cleaning up blood. So we've lost a lot of that work to the visual effects department. But we've gained other things. So it's a changing business from a lot of different, for a lot of different reasons.
Do you think they'll ever be able to like really recreate an explosion where you could have an explosion in real life, so to speak, and then have one that's just CGI, AI, and people would not be able to tell the difference?
Yes, 100%. There's physics simulation software that they use for simulating risk analysis for oil refinery explosions and things like that that are extremely realistic. And the visual effects department can use that kind of technology, and they put their textures and color palettes on there, and it looks like photorealism. So,
have you ever seen one that you couldn't tell?
Well, if I couldn't tell, I wouldn't know I saw it that I couldn't tell, right? It's one of those things, but you can tell generally because there's just subtle clues, lack of interaction with, set pieces, maybe the way the lighting interacts, but they have control over all that. It's really how much they want to spend in post-production tweaking those VFX shots, and they can make them look very convincing.
Is the post-production of that, would that be financially in a place where no, it's actually just cheaper to blow it up?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably cheaper to blow it up, and it probably is more dynamic on the set. It's going to have better impact on the screen, but it also comes with a cost. There's a prep time. We have to clear the set of all people while we're working, which holds up production, and time is money. So at the end of the day, the time that they lose for us to prep the explosion on the set, to blow it up, and then to clean up the mess and prepare for a take two is often more time than they're ready to spend money on. So for them, it financially makes sense to do the more expensive effect because the time on set is more valuable.
That's pretty much all the questions I got. What's kind of coming up next for you? If people want to learn more about this, what should they do?
I see it as really, it's a dying art, because it's just the whole industry is kind of changing. And unless there's a big resurgence in the audience demanding realism, I have a feeling because of risk and time on set, all these things are getting less and less common. So I have a hard time recommending the film industry as a career. But if people are interested in explosives and things related to that, there's a lot of college courses and degree programs related to explosive engineering.
What's that like then in the industry, though? I mean, do the people who are in the industry, do they feel like last of a dying breed?
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. It's, we've all watched it change dramatically in the last, it's been a slow progression, but it's really taken a turn in the last couple of years. And we can see that the industry it is an industry, it's a business. And so the balance sheet matters. And they're finding ways to make that, how to say this without sounding cynical. They're finding ways to make it make sense financially. But as they do less and less of that over time, fewer and fewer people are getting into the industry to become, tutored by the older people that are retiring out. And eventually there won't be a talent pool to pull off those kind of shots. That's the thing that we're all kind of seeing right now that's a little bit depressing. It's like, we don't have a younger generation coming up behind us that's eager to really learn, and there aren't enough projects of that type to keep everybody employed, so people are leaving the industry.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Profoundly Pointless. From society and sexuality to science and sports, every week we explore something new from a side of life you may never have heard of. Subscribe if you're interested. There's a playlist, I think, on the right if you want to see more videos like this. Someday, I'm going to finish painting that wall. And just for the record, I'm not orange. I just don't know how to fix this. But thanks for checking out the show. Would love to hear from you. Okay, I should stop. Stop. There it is.